You know, in Quincy, we had a gavel for that. We just like, or a bell, right? You ring the bell. Well, good morning, everyone. It is time for us to begin this morning, and as you can see, the section that we're going to be covering this morning is the preparation for the Passover, the disciples contending for precedence, Judas and Peter's denial and betrayal are both foretold. Those are the things that we're going to cover this morning as we get into this material. And so we'll get started, and I'm going to break it into the sections this morning and read each of those categories, and we'll come back and talk about them. And so in Matthew 26:17, it says, "Now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, 'Where do you want us to prepare the Passover? Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?' And he said, 'Go into the city and to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is near. I am to keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.' The disciples did as Jesus directed them, and they prepared the Passover." In Mark 14, the parallel passage here, starting in verse 12, it says, "Now on the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb was being sacrificed, his disciples said to him, 'Where do you want us to go and prepare for you to eat the Passover?' And he sent two of his disciples and said to them, 'Go into the city, and a man will meet you there, and a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him. And wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, the teacher says, where is my guest room in which I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he himself will show you a large upper room furnished and ready. Prepare for us there.' The disciples went out and came to the city and found it just as he told them, and they prepared the Passover." In Luke 22:7, starting in verse 7, it says, "Then came the first day of unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. And Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, 'Go and prepare the Passover for us, so that we may eat it.' They said to him, 'Where do you want us to prepare it?' And he said to them, 'When you have entered the city, a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house that he enters. And you shall say to the owner of the house, the teacher says to you, where is the guest room which I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large furnished upper room. Prepare it there.' And they left and found everything just as he had told them. And they prepared the Passover." So this whole thing is talking about the preparation of the Passover, and we get the timing for the Passover when we go back to the Old Testament and we look at Exodus in verse 12, or chapter 12, verse 6, and then in 13:4, and then also in Leviticus, where it says, "You shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to kill it at twilight." And then 13:4 says, "On this day in the month of Abib, you are to go forth." You are about to go forth. And then Leviticus 23:5, it says, "In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight is the Lord's Passover. Then on the 15th day of the same month, there is a feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread." And so you guys have probably seen this chart before or something like it. And I put it up there knowing that you guys have probably looked at it, but it's interesting to me, and it helps me to think about when you're reading through and you see month names, and you can kind of tie the festivals in as you go around the wheel there to help you put it in perspective. You can know, okay, it was kind of this time of year, it was this season, or however you want to do it. And so we're in the first month there. The Passover is in Nisan. And then you work your way all the way around through the 12 months. And that correlates to our March and April, which you guys, I'm sure you know that too, because the rest of the world celebrates Easter at that time, the time of the Passover. And so that starts there. And then these words in yellow are Abib, Ziv, Etham, and Bul are the names for those months prior to captivity. And then after captivity, they switched to these other names for those months for some reason. I couldn't find a reason why, but that's what all the commentary said is that that's the reason those names are in there, sometimes used differently than the months we see. But they don't know what all of them were prior to exile. And then up here at the top where you see this, I have a pointer, I could do this little thing. This Adar 2, that's actually their version of leap year. So to make sure all of the festivals happen on the appropriate days, in the appropriate months, they have to adjust, just like we do with our leap year. And so they add this Adar the second, or Adar 2, however you want to describe it there. And that would happen for them 7 times in a 19-year period, that they would have their leap year. For us, that happens 5 times essentially in that same time period. So it was more frequent with their calendar and the way they break it down. And so, again, that's just there for that. And then the other thing that's interesting to me is that they broke it down. We would call this spring, summer, fall, and winter, and they call it latter rains, dry season, early rains, and rainy season would be the way they describe their year and break it down. So just some background information on this section here. And again, I like, calendars are almost as interesting to me as maps, which Chad would love, but they break down that the way they lay things out and give you information is really cool. So I thought you guys might enjoy seeing that. So as we're talking about these passages about the Passover, we know that when they are sitting there, and as we move in through the text and he starts to tell them about Peter's denial and those kind of things, that they aren't actually at that moment partaking of the Passover. They have probably done that already at this point. And we know that because in Exodus 12:11, it says to us, "Now you shall eat it in this manner, with your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover." So they would have been standing while eating. They would have, staff in hand, ready to go. The whole idea was that they needed to be ready when God said, "Get out," to get out. And so as they're reclining at the table, we know that this wasn't in the middle of the Passover feast, based on what they're instructed here. And so the other thing that we can see here is that we know that it took some time, right? Jesus says, "Go prepare these things. Go set it up for me, get ready for it." And obviously that took them time to go into town, find the guy with the pitcher, get to the upper room, get everything ready. And then we get a timestamp for us too. It says, when evening had come, Jesus came. So we're told that from the time he told them to go, now we're into the evening, which makes sense because that's when they would have done the Passover anyway, after sundown that day. Any questions or comments on that section? So let's move down and read about Judas's betrayal here. In Matthew 26:20, it says, "Now when evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12 disciples, and they were eating, and as they were eating, he said, 'Truly I say to you that one of you will betray me.' Being deeply grieved, they each one began to say to him, "Surely not I, Lord." And he answered and said, "He who dipped his hand with me in the bowl is the one who will betray me. The Son of Man is to go just as it is written of him, but woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born." And Judas, who was betraying him, said, "Surely is not I, Rabbi?" Jesus said to him, "You have said it yourself." In Mark 14:17 through 21, it says, when it was evening, he came with the 12, and as they were reclining at the table and eating, Jesus said, "Truly I say to you that one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." They began to be grieved and say to him one by one, "Surely not I." And he said to them, "It is one of the 12 the one who dips with me in the bowl. For the Son of Man is to go just as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born." And then the same passage in Luke says, "Behold, the hand of the one betraying me is with mine on the table. For indeed the Son of Man is going as it has been determined, but woe to that man by whom he is betrayed." And they began discussing among themselves which one of them it might be who was going to do this thing. And then we have in John as well, it says, when Jesus said this, he became troubled in spirit and testified and said, "Truly, truly, I say to you that one of you will betray me." The disciples began looking at one another, at a loss to know which one he was talking about or speaking. There was reclining on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. So Simon Peter gestured to him and said, "Tell us who it is whom you are speaking. Tell us who it is of whom he is speaking." He, leaning back thus on Jesus' bosom, said to him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "That is the one to whom I shall dip the morsel and give it to him." So when he had dipped that morsel, he took it and gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. After the morsel, Satan entered into him. Therefore Jesus said to him, "What you do quickly." Now no one of those reclining at the table knew for what purpose he had said this to him. For some were supposing, because Judas had the money box, that Jesus was saying to him, "Buy the things that we have need of for the feast," or else that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel, he went out immediately, and it was night. So we have all these accounts here, and there's some really important stuff to pull from this, because one of the clearest indications of who was going to betray him, we just read right there in John. He says, "I'm going to dip my hand in the thing and then give the morsel to the guy who's going to betray me." That's how you're going to know. But for some reason, they still didn't understand. I don't know why that is. But maybe it's the fact that they were thinking to themselves, who would do that? What one of the 12 of us who've been with him this whole time, have seen what we've seen, who would have done that? It's kind of like Eric from last Sunday night. We just can't get into the head of them and understand why it is they didn't see it. But they didn't see it. And even if they had thought one of their number was capable of something like that, they never would even imagine that it would lead to his arrest and eventually his death. That wasn't where their head was. They didn't think he was going to die. Can you guys imagine that moment? When Jesus says, "It's one of you." Think about being Judas at that moment. If that were me, I think you would just freeze. Like, whoa, I've been caught. I'm in serious trouble here. What happens next? What is going to happen to me? And then you would start probably spinning into, okay, how can I explain this away? How can I, I'm going to get out of this. But imagine that feeling of being caught by Jesus. That would have been enough for me to turn around and say, I'm not doing this thing. At least I say that standing here, looking back on it. Yeah, that's my point. I can say that from here. I don't know what I would have done in that situation. Yeah, exactly. And then in Matthew, you just get this absolutely audacious statement from him, right? Surely it's not I, Rabbi. You just came from making the deal with them. You probably just barely had time to go and hide your 30 pieces of silver before coming to this meal. You were just called out for your betrayal. And you look Jesus in the face and say, you got it wrong, man. It wasn't me. Again, like last Sunday night, I just can't wrap my head around that. How do you have that kind of courage to stand? No, you're good.
I think it does reveal Jesus' conviction about who Jesus was. He didn't truly believe that he was the Messiah.
Right.
At some point, or maybe never believed it truly, but he was, by now the ship had sailed, he figured Jesus was just a guy.
Right. Or potentially he didn't think, like everybody else, it would lead to Jesus' death. He could have just been thinking, hey, here's a spot for me to make 30 pieces of silver, but nothing serious is going to happen. It's Jesus. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Charlie? Absolutely. Yep. That's for sure. And so, as we're looking at this and we're talking about Judas, Matthew 26:24 tells us something really important, because it tells us that Jesus isn't caught off guard by Judas's betrayal. He tells him, this is according to God's will. This is what's written here. I knew this was going to happen. And you're not catching me. You're not accomplishing something that I didn't plan on. In fact, you're helping the plan. Nobody else gets that, but you're helping start the process of me ending up on the cross by identifying me to the enemy. But woe to you for doing it. Watch out. I have a question for you. Why would Judas be so severely punished if it was God's plan for him to do this thing? Absolutely. That's exactly the point I was going to, is that if you say 100% God made Judas do that, you remove his free will from the situation. And if you've removed his free will from the situation, you've turned God into someone who can associate himself with evil. And we know that that's not possible. He's completely righteous. Daniel.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to add on to that, even in the Old Testament, it talks about where, Babylon, they would, come and afflict Israel. And, God would let that happen. But even then, the Babylonians, they would have been punished.
Yeah.
They had the free will to make that choice to inflict injury on the Israelites. But even then, God says, yeah, I can still use them. But the Babylonians, they're still going to get punished as well. And so you even see that same thing even in the Old Testament.
Right, absolutely. Kevin.
God's not a respecter of persons. We have a hard time understanding this particular kind of issue because we're mortal and we don't understand how that works. Like when it talks about he hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Right.
A lot of even our brothers and sisters think that God did something to Pharaoh against his will. He did not. But it's hard for us to understand.
Right, right. I don't think we do struggle with that for sure, but I think it's really simple if you realize that God can't be responsible for evil. He's not going to use, see, I mean, I'm stumbling over explaining it just now, but you can't, God just does not associate with evil. We get from Isaiah 59, 1 and 2, it tells us that, behold, the Lord's arm is not so short that it cannot save, nor his ear so dull that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God. And your sins have turned his face from you so he does not hear. It's us that separate from God. It's our evil that keeps us separated from him. God is not the one that would perpetrate evil directly.
Yeah, but he, like Pharaoh, like these other examples in the Old Testament, he uses our evil to accomplish his purposes. He
Sure.
uses all those miracles, those plagues to show forth his power and majesty in freeing the Israelites, but he used the hardness of Pharaoh's heart to do that. So
Yeah.
he takes anything we do, even if it's evil purposes, he'll turn it around to work for good to those that love him.
Right, right. But you always had the choice. You always had free will. There you go. I was going to put that one in here too. I didn't do that.
I think also, so fast forwarding to Judas and after the betrayal and everything, he also would have had the choice to repent. But you see, he didn't make that choice. I'm wondering, did Jesus know that Judas was not going to repent? Because indeed, one that does not repent and kind of goes that way, woe is that person.
Right.
So I kind of wondered, did Jesus also know that Judas was not going to repent? And so, woe is Judas.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the answer to that has got to be yes, because he's God on earth. He knows everything, right? But again, he didn't control Judas and make him not repent. Judas did have the opportunity to repent or to even stop what he was doing. Kai.
Going back to like Pharaoh and that kind of ties into Judas, if you read the account, not until the 8th plague does the Lord say, I have hardened his heart. It says Pharaoh has hardened his heart,
Oh, okay.
but not until the 8th plague does it say, I have hardened his heart. God gave him every chance. And I think it's the same with Judas. He knew the heart there. And he spent 3 years with Judas, teaching him like the other disciples, giving him every chance.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to the point where it was like, I'm going to use you because your heart is already there.
Yep.
So, back to the point about not repenting, Judas not repenting, it occurred to me that that's the contrast between these two. We're going to talk about Peter's denial, and Judas' betrayal. That's the contrast. One of them they were both guilty afterwards. They both
Right.
felt guilt and shame.
Yeah.
But one of them took that guilt and shame and used it in a godly way, like we read in Corinthians, to help him return to God.
Yep.
Right? Peter did that. But
Absolutely. And I think it's important too, as we're looking at this section, to realize that all of them went, whoa, is it me? Could it be me? Really? And, you know, with what we've seen from them and the kind of, and what we'll talk about it, maybe we'll talk about it if we have time, this kind of jockeying for position, like who's the greatest, and I want to sit on his right hand and I want to sit on his left hand, this kind of thing. If it kind of seems like they would have gone, oh yeah, we knew it was going to be Judas. Oh no, it was Bartholomew. He's the guy. He's your guy. But they don't do any of that. They don't start pointing fingers. They don't start making arguments against one another. They just go, oh wow. Who's he talking about? And could he really be talking about me? Yeah, exactly, right? So we're going to skip over the Lord's Supper because that's what the lesson this morning is about, because that falls in the middle of this text here. And we're going to talk about Peter's falling away at this point. And in Matthew 26:30, it says, after singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, you will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike down the shepherd and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered. But after I have been raised, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. But Peter said to him, even though all may fall away because of you, I will never fall away. And Jesus said to him, truly I say to you that this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. All the disciples said the same thing also. In Mark 14, it says, after singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives, and Jesus said to them, you will all fall away because it is written, I will strike down the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. But after I have been raised, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. But Peter said, even though all may fall away, yet I will not. And Jesus said to him, truly I say to you that this very night before the rooster crows twice, you yourself will deny me 3 times. But Peter kept saying insistently, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And they were all saying the same thing also. Luke 22:21-23 says, behold, the hand of the one betraying me is with me on the table. For indeed the Son of Man is going... Wait, this is in the wrong spot, huh? Okay. Nope. That's Matthew again. Anyway, so we get this betrayal or the denial by Peter at this point. And it says that they went out and they sang a psalm. And just as a note here, traditionally at the end of the Passover feast, the Jews would sing what has become known as the Hallel Psalms, or the Psalms of Praise, which would have been Psalm 114 through 118. We don't know necessarily that that's what they sang here, but that was what was being done at that time at the end of the Passover. And then verse 31 of Matthew makes a quote from the Old Testament, and that's from Zechariah, where it says, awake, O sword, against my shepherd and against the man, my associate, declares the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd and the sheep may be scattered, and I will turn my hand against the little ones. It says this night. Very specific. It doesn't say this is going to happen over the next few days. It says this night, this will happen. And these guys still aren't aware of what's really going on here. They still don't have a clue that something unusual is about to happen. He's been trying to tell them over and over and over again that he's going to be killed. And they still don't get it. They're just, for whatever reason, they've got this physical king mindset that they just can't get past. And so they're not aware that this is going to get really frightening and really strange for them in just a little bit of time. But in verse 32, Jesus, he never leaves them without hope. Because he says, don't worry about it. When I rise again, I'm going to lead you into Galilee. I'm coming back. The death is temporary. And I will be back to guide you after the fact. I saw a hand. Was that you, Charlie?
Luke 22:31 says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. How does he do that?
How does he sift him like wheat?
How does he demand permission to sift Simon, Peter, as wheat?
That's a good question that I'm just going to be honest, I don't have an answer for you because I didn't study that particular part of that. It didn't.
Well, it sounds like similar to in Job, when Satan is making petitions to God about what he wants to do. God allows it. God allows him to make petitions. I mean, that's clear.
Yeah, yeah. Kevin?
I think it's interesting. It's important that we read verse 32. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. So Satan may have asked, but it wasn't granted. He can ask all day long.
Gotcha.
Still God's power to bend back to Job, to allow it or not.
Right, right.
It seems like here, he doesn't allow it. His answer is no.
You know, the denial is actually the sifting, like that temptation to deny Christ was the sifting of the wheat. That's when Peter was sifted as wheat. So Satan did get what he asked for, but Jesus knew that wouldn't change the fact that Peter would return to him later. Yes, because it says that when you have turned again, strengthen your brother. So that shows that he was sifted, he failed, and then he repented. That's the difference. I've always
Right.
thought of the sifting as being temptation. Right. We're all tested, aren't we?
Right.
I think Satan asks all of us to be sifted.
Sure, sure. And what that shows us is this. Prior to Christ's death, Peter appears to have this great faith. Like, he's the first one to say, step out of the boat, take me out of the boat. He's the first one to come up.
You just said he died for Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is pretty strong faith, right? But what we see is it's conditional. It's conditional on his understanding of the Messiah. And his understanding the Messiah is going to be here on this earth. Go ahead.
It's easy to say one thing, as Peter did. This is what I'll do when this circumstance comes up. When the circumstance, in fact, comes up, another thing happens.
Right, right. Yeah, and again, that's Peter's,
It's all of us from time to time.
right. He did not understand that, I mean, that's why he gets the sword out and he's willing to cut the ear off of Malchus, because he thinks he's protecting the physical king. That's class. We didn't get through everything, sorry.